Denver, the topic of data retention policies came up the other day in a meeting, and it got me thinking. I'm assuming this is something that is just not on the forefront of the minds of various leaders within organizations. Can you explain a little bit about why should an organization even care about a data retention policy, and what are kind of the basics? What should they be thinking about?
Data retention policies became really important kind of in the early 2000s. Usually, the conversations start as a legal discussion, sometimes as an HR discussion. And I think it comes about because people have a tendency to hoard data, and data is something that can be very expensive to retrieve. And a lot of times companies get involved in lawsuits that they really shouldn't have any dog in the fight. But when their employees, oftentimes, for instance, they'll use their company email for personal reasons. So if they get caught up in if one of their employees is going through a nasty divorce, for instance, and the opposing lawyer finds out that, hey, they may have emailed something that would be important, they can subpoena those emails, and then it's incumbent upon the company to provide that data, even if it's on an old backup tape. Maybe they don't have the tape drive anymore, but they still are required to go fishing through all those years of data and find what the judge is requiring. So it can be a very expensive process to go try to find that data. So the way to work around that is with a data retention and destruction policy. So if you state in your policy that we only keep 3 years worth of email data, and you can prove that you actually adhere to that policy by destroying that data at regular intervals, then you're not required usually to go back and look for that data.
Yes, and I will second this thought of people and therefore organizations do oftentimes have this unique predilection to hoard data. It is interesting, and you and I have been on projects where we can see, and I think it boils down to personality type. You can see people just really struggle with the idea of my 10-year-old emails. You mean you're going to destroy them? People can be panic stricken, can't they?
Yeah, we run into that quite often, and honestly, we're all very guilty of it. These days, the storage of that data is pretty cheap in reality, and so it's cheaper to keep the data than to spend the time to go through and decide what to delete, and that's all well and good until it isn't, and that's usually because some lawyer got involved, and then it gets to be very expensive. There are also things that make it hard. When you have large amounts of data, everything takes longer. So in the event of a disaster where we have to do a complete restore, the more data we have to copy from point A to point B, it's just going to slow it down, and usually unnecessarily so. Most of that data is of no real value. It's just nostalgic in most cases. So, and there are reasons to keep data, but in most cases, we overestimate the value of any individual file or email or any kind of data point.
Yep. And of course, I suppose it goes without saying, organizations, it's really a two-step process. Come up with the policy that makes sense, and then adhere to the policy and execute the plan. So that's a whole nother ball of wax, I suppose.
Yeah, that's why you don't want a policy that is overly complicated. You can't have lots of different types of data. You have to certainly segment your data. Financial data has to be kept longer than a personal email, or I guess we should say business email, because we shouldn't be using business email for personal reasons. But an email usually should not be kept for 7 years, but the financials generally do have to be kept that long. So you have to segment the data, but you can't have 10 different types of data and expect to be able to execute your policy in the way that you would need to. So really 2 or 3 is what we recommend. And then we have to make sure that as we're destroying that data, that we're destroying all copies of it. That means the backups have to adhere to that, as well as your inbox and that sort of thing. So there's lots of things to think about. It's pretty complex. It has to be driven by somebody internally. And that person is not always the most popular person as a result, because people like to hold on to their data. They hate having somebody remind them that it has to be deleted. And we usually recommend a kind of a 2-step process in the deletion of that data. So usually it goes into sort of an archive for a period of time before we've actually pulled the trigger. So it can be kind of a complex situation.
Yeah. Well, at any rate, I think that's a good crash course into just the idea that we need to be aware about data retention policies. If anyone has further questions, just feel free to reach out to us anytime. We're here to help. Denver, thank you for your time today.
Thanks.